All right, all right. We are good to go. Let me go get my food really quick. And then we're going to watch some videos. Where's my. Let me just check the stream first before I get up. All right, we're good. So I may look like I'm overdoing it, but I'm gonna tell you what I have. I'm gonna tell you what I have. I'm gonna tell you what I have. So I have some naan bread, some regular naan. I warmed them up in the pot or in the pan. I mean, I got some kale, carrots, and red cabbage, and under there is some chicken. Um, Marinated chicken. I don't remember what the marinade was, but marinated chicken and naan bread, and I also have these little garlic things, garlic sauce things, that I will probably put on the naan and then pick up from the salad over here. The presentation isn't that good, but the food, let me eat it and figure it out. But there is a video I do want to see. I think I put it in my watch later. I want to watch this video. So let's do that.
I haven't been to the grocery store in months because this delivery service offers hundreds of high quality, non GMO groceries and recipes that help me feel my best daily.
That's
Hungry
actually
is
where I
the
got this
easiest way to
food
take all
from.
the stress and guesswork out of
Shout out
eating
to
healthy. Think of it as having your own personal
Hungry.
shopper and nutritionist.
And also, I'm not going to skip the ads. I want to
personalized meal plans
allow
that
the
ship straight to your door. Building
the creator of this
perfect
video
list
to
takes
get their ad
seconds, thanks to
revenue.
smart cart technology. It customizes everything
I
based
heard
on
the
health goals,
this is a
dietary
great
restrictions, and
video
flavor preferences, with meals starting as low as $3.99
from a few different
per serving.
people.
All of the recipes are incredibly delicious and easy to make, with most taking 20 minutes tops to put together.
That's what we're gonna
And
do.
with over 15,000 recipes and 20 plus dietary preferences, they have you covered on whatever you like to eat. Check out Hungry Root today and ditch the grocery store for good.
Hey there everyone, sports fans, Galaxy lovers, and everyone else watching. Welcome to Galaxy Live's First and Fold, where we figure out which new devices will be the highlights of the field.
Hold up.
Puerto Rico is paradise, beaches, lush mountains, and a rich culture. But beneath the beauty, something is very wrong. In 2006, nearly 4 million people lived here. By 2100, it'll be 1 million. That is insane. Puerto Rico, a US territory but not a state, is the poorest, most unequal part of the United States. Puerto Rico, a US territory but not a state.
I want to see this. So the mass, I mean, it looked like the population was rising up until around Maria, which I believe occurred in 2016 or 2017. I don't remember. Let's see. Let's look it up. Sorry, I keep hitting the mic. September 2017. Oh, no, actually, it was. Population was declining since late 2000s. Damn.
Insane. Puerto Rico, a US territory but not a state, is the poorest, most unequal part of the United States, and it's in freefall. A 20-year economic crisis, austerity, hurricanes, earthquakes, and a pandemic hit the island hard. And instead of help rebuilding, Puerto Ricans got skyrocketing costs, privatized services, and mass displacement. But here's the thing, Puerto Rico isn't poor. It made American tycoons rich off sugar, then it became a shining star of development, one of the richest places in the Americas, the Caribbean's manufacturing powerhouse, pumping out life-saving medicines and medical equipment.
I didn't know that.
All that wealth was drained off the island. Since 2006, 15% of Puerto Ricans have left. Puerto Rico now has the 7th oldest population on Earth. The tax base is shrinking as young people flee while more and more people enter retirement. Puerto Rico's birth rate is the 7th lowest in the world. It's lower than Japan's. Nearly half the population lives below the poverty line. And despite paying more for electricity than anywhere else in the United States, rolling blackouts frequently plunge Puerto Rico into darkness for weeks, if not months at a time. In order to resolve its $123 billion debt since 2016, Puerto Rico hasn't even been ruled by its own government. An unelected fiscal control board, nicknamed La Junta, handpicked by the US president, called
Okay. I'm sure he's going to get into it. But I want to stop it here also because I made a little mess. I'm going to go get a napkin. But this board, he's going to get into it. What I do want to make clear is, and he's also probably going to get into this, Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. The people are considered citizens, but they have no representation in government. And these people, who were not elected by the Puerto Rican people, are responsible for overseeing Puerto Rico. The people of Puerto Rico did not vote them in. Let me go get my napkin. Hold up.
the shots. And Puerto Ricans, despite being US citizens, can't vote for the president that appoints them. The local government has sold out the country as a paradise for the ultra-rich.
Dorado, Puerto Rico, and I bought this $16 million house.
Now, real estate tycoons, YouTubers, and crypto traders have flocked to the island in their thousands to live in a sunny US territory while paying no taxes. A Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans is arriving fast, and this is the story of how we got here.
The timeless surf pounds this Caribbean shoreline of what Christopher Columbus dubbed El Puerto Rico.
This is Puerto Rico, called Boriquen in the original Taino language, which is why Puerto Ricans call themselves
Boricua.
Now you might be wondering why this island, all the way over here, is part of the United States. For over 400 years, Puerto Rico was a Spanish colony with no political autonomy.
Que Colón descubrió estas tierras, vinieron y se apoderaron de las tierras que había aquí. Y no tan solo se apoderaron de la tierra, sino que esclavizaron a sus verdaderos dueños, a los indios. Pues se fue desarrollando la agricultura. Durante la época de España aquí se desarrolló una gran industria del café, sobre todo, ¿no?
But by the late 1800s, things were changing. In 1897, growing anger with Spanish rule fueled independence movements in Cuba and Puerto Rico. Faced with mounting resistance, Spain finally caved.
I want to stop right here. And I want to give a little acknowledgement to this little area right here on the island of Hispaniola called Haiti. And those movements were a direct result of Haitian influence on the greater Antilles. You can't talk about liberation movements in the Caribbean without acknowledging the influence that the Haitian people had over the rest of the Caribbean.
Both islands limited self-rule with elected parliaments. Puerto Ricans finally got a taste of freedom. Just a few months later, the US declared war on Spain. Spain, which was an old, decrepit and dying empire, quickly lost the war, and in the 1898 Treaty of Paris, handed Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States, while Cuba became an independent country under strict American oversight. From that moment on, Puerto Rico would be an American colony, a valuable military outpost in the Caribbean. In Washington, lawmakers weren't exactly sure what to do with Puerto Rico. Should they grant it independence, make it a state, or keep it in limbo? Eventually, limbo won out, as American lawmakers didn't want to grant equal rights to savages addicted to headhunting and cannibalism. The Insular Cases, a series of Supreme Court rulings, cemented Puerto Rico's status as an unincorporated territory that belonged to but was not part of the United States. This allowed the US to rule over Puerto Rico without granting its people full constitutional rights. Puerto Rico was forbidden from negotiating trade treaties with foreign nations or setting its own taxes and tariffs.
And that
Puerto
goes
Ricans
until
were
today
subject
as
to
well.
US taxation without representation in Congress. The island was forced into the US tariff system. There was now tariff-free trade between Puerto Rico and the United States, making Puerto Rican sugar highly profitable for American refiners, as it could enter the US tariff-free, unlike sugar from a foreign country like Cuba. But this destroyed Puerto Rico's other industries. The island's main export was coffee, grown by self-sufficient farmers who had exported their beans to Europe through Spain. But now its exports were subject to tariffs Europeans placed on US goods. Cheaper Brazilian beans rapidly took over the market, and Puerto Rican beans couldn't compete in the US market, which was already dominated by Brazil. Puerto Rico's coffee industry, once the fourth largest in the world, collapsed,
I didn't know that.
along with the livelihoods of thousands of farmers. In 1900, the US appointed Charles Herbert Allen from Massachusetts as Puerto Rico's governor. As governor, he raised taxes on Puerto Ricans and denied them loans to farmers. In 1900, the US appointed Charles Herbert Allen from Massachusetts as Puerto Rico's governor. As governor, he raised taxes on Puerto Ricans and denied them loans to develop their own industry, while subsidizing American-owned farms, and he handed over tons of government offices to high-paid Americans. Hurricane San Ciriaco devastated the island's coffee crop in 1899. A year later, Allen refused to distribute relief funds. Then in 1900, the US brought in a property tax on the value of property. American banks decided the value of the property. American-owned land was appraised low, meaning those owners paid almost no tax. Puerto Rican farmers, well, their land was appraised high, and
Redlining.
their tax bills exploded. The farmers, reeling from the hurricane and penniless, were forced to sell their land. And guess who bought that land on the cheap? American sugar companies. Governor Charles Herbert Allen spent just 17 months setting this all up in Puerto Rico. Then he resigned, and he went straight to Wall Street and started building a sugar empire. He and his business partners snatched up the very land he had helped seize from Puerto Rican farmers, and he got lots of help from all those men he had placed in positions of power.
This is making my stomach hurt. I probably should have waited till I was done eating to watch this. I didn't expect it to do this.
By 1920, Allen and US bankers had converted nearly half of all arable land in Puerto Rico into sugar plantations owned by American corporations. Thousands of once self-sufficient Puerto Rican farmers were kicked off their land. Now they worked as landless wage laborers, paid starvation wages on plantations on the land that they had been displaced from. While Wall Street made millions, sugarcane workers on the island earned just 75 cents a day, less than half of what they made under the Spanish. What was once land used to grow a diverse range of crops and food was transformed into a sugar monoculture for export. Hunger became rampant. By 1907, Charles Herbert Allen's American Sugar Refining Company was the largest sugar syndicate in the world. Today, it's called Domino Sugar.
Performing on the biggest stage in the world was just one step in my journey. Hi, I'm Ronnie, and I teach people all over the world how to dance with
The profits from Puerto Rico's sugar industry flowed directly to the United States with no reinvestment in the local economy. The work of Puerto Ricans helped to develop the US while their home remained stagnant. Without capital, Puerto Ricans couldn't build their own industries. A local middle class never emerged, and the island remained economically stunted. This was a textbook colonial economy. Puerto Rico's entire economy was redirected to produce what it did not consume, sugar, and was forced to import everything else from its colonizer. The island existed solely to fuel American industry and to purchase American goods. As it was put in 1929, the American flag flies over a prosperous factory worked by slaves, who have lost their land and may soon lose their guitars and their songs. Puerto Rico is now a land of beggars and millionaires.
All right.
In 1917, Puerto Ricans were granted US citizenship, but there was a catch. They couldn't vote in US elections, but they could be drafted.
Fuck, bro. Fuck. Okay. This is really actually making me really upset. I don't know where he's gonna go, so I don't want to derail the conversation. Um, but he's still pretty early, like in the 20th century. I just want to let's just wait to see where he goes from here because I don't know too like I'm not too familiar with all the details of the early 20th century. I'm more familiar with the mid 20th century into like the 70s, 80s.
Just in time for the United States to enter the First World War. In 1920, the US imposed the Jones Act. It mandates
which
that
still
any
exists
goods
today.
shipped between two US ports must travel on vessels that are built in the US, owned by US citizens, and crewed by US residents. A ship can transport goods from Santiago, Chile to Miami, but if it wants to pick up more goods in Miami to bring to New York, which is the most economical thing to do, it would have to transfer everything to a US-owned ship. Puerto Rico is right next to major shipping routes. The logical way to get goods there would be for cargo ships to stop on their way to the mainland US, drop some stuff off, and pick up new stuff. But because of the Jones Act, ships dropped their goods off in Jacksonville, Florida. Then, 4 US shipping companies who monopolized this route and were convicted of price fixing jack up the prices before sending those goods to Puerto Rico. Shipping a container from the US East Coast to Puerto Rico on a Jones Act ship costs about $3,000. Shipping that same container to the Dominican Republic right next door on a non-Jones Act ship costs $1,500. The Jones Act inflates prices across the island where people earn a third of the mainland wage. This also makes Puerto Rico's goods more expensive to export, making them less competitive. The Jones Act costs Puerto Rico $1.4 billion a year, and that might be a low estimate. The nearby US Virgin Islands are exempt from the Jones Act, and goods there cost half as much as in Puerto Rico. After the US systematically dismantled Puerto Rico's agricultural sector, the lush, green, fertile island now imports nearly all of its food from the United States. Food in Puerto Rico costs twice as much as it does in Florida, and now about 40% of Puerto Ricans are estimated to be food insecure, 4 times the national average. Now, you may be wondering, if this law is so bad, why doesn't the US Congress just repeal it? Well, lobbying groups for American shipping companies have a lot more influence over Congress than Puerto Ricans who have no political voice. During the 1930s and the 1940s, the United States brutally suppressed Puerto Rico's independence movement through massacres, the criminalization of the Puerto Rican flag, and the arrest of thousands of Puerto Ricans and the murder of independence leaders.
So, first of all, this is a very important man in Puerto Rican history. The Ponce massacre, if I am correct, I don't know if I am, but I do know that the first time that I'm aware of that the U.S. bombed their own citizens was in Puerto Rico. The second time was here in Philadelphia during the Move movement, but the first time was in Puerto Rico. All right, let's continue.
The criminalization of the Puerto Rican flag, and the arrest of thousands of Puerto Ricans and the murder of
So, because I don't think he's going to go too in depth on this. So let's check it out. So the gag law, or Ley de la Mordaza, was a Puerto Rican law enacted in 1948, Law 53, to suppress the island's pro-independence movement. It criminalized actions such as displaying the Puerto Rican flag, singing patriotic songs, and speaking or writing about independence. Violators faced severe penalties, including up to 10 years in prison or a $10,000 fine. The law was signed by the U.S. appointed governor, Jesus de Piñero. I don't know who he is, and remained in effect until 1957, when it was repealed as unconstitutional. Key aspects of the gag law: purpose to silence the growing movement of Puerto Rican independence and sovereignty. The law made it a crime to own or display the Puerto Rican flag, sing patriotic songs or tunes, speak or write about Puerto Rican independence, organize or hold meetings with subversive or independent focused purposes. Punishment: violators could be imprisoned for up to 10 years or fined $10,000 or both. It was a blatant violation of First Amendment rights and was used to intimidate and imprison those advocating for Puerto Rican freedom. Let's see how much $10,000 is. That's how much money it could cost you just to talk about Puerto Rican independence, just to fly the Puerto Rican flag, to sing songs about independence.
Independence leaders. To quell dissent, the US government collaborated with anti-independence groups to enact limited reforms.
In 1952, the colonial status was modified to become the Commonwealth, a free associated state. Under the Commonwealth, Puerto Ricans can elect their own legislature, but the laws passed in Puerto Rico can be overturned by the United States Congress.
These measures, though, did not grant real sovereignty. The island remained a US territory. It was not allowed to become a state, and they still couldn't vote in US elections, and they still can't today.
Hi, Hey, I'm Brother Nature. My sister, Mother Nature, grows everything organic. She gets all the credit, but I make it ridiculous.
I'm gonna mute it. I'm not gonna. Well, I mean, if you're watching
I'm a flavor
on
genius.
the
Oh,
what's it called?
Mother Nature.
I'll do this for you.
Nature's path.
I'm gonna do that. So I'm interested to see where he goes from here. Like when he starts talking about like the more modern news.
After World War II, global sugar prices collapsed. Puerto Rico, one of the poorest places in the Caribbean, had to radically transform its economy. In the 1940s, they started Operation Bootstrap, eliminating all corporate taxes to encourage US investment in order to industrialize the island. This triggered a massive influx of American businesses that set up factories to benefit from extremely cheap Puerto Rican labor, with tariff-free access to the US market and no tax bill. Puerto Rico rapidly industrialized, turning into a hub for manufacturing garments, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, machinery, and electronics. Between 1950 and 1971, per capita...
Just for myself here. 1950 and 71. This was around the time that my great grandmother was functioning as a member of society in Puerto Rico. She lived there. And this is also around the time that my grandmother, that my grandmother and my great grandmother and my grandmother's sister moved from the island.
The income rose by over 400%. Illiteracy was largely eliminated and life expectancy jumped from 46 years to 70 years. In 1976, the US Congress brought in Section 936, which allowed these US companies to repatriate all of their profits back to the US tax-free. Puerto Rico became one of the world's leading producers of pharmaceuticals and still is, generating billions in profits for American firms. But this industrial boom came at a terrible cost. American pharmaceutical companies used Puerto Rican women as test subjects for unapproved contraceptive drugs without their consent. At the same time, American eugenicists pushed for the mass sterilization of Puerto Rican women.
As part of a
Hold on, I'm gonna let it play out.
plan to reduce the population problem on the island.
By 1974, 1 in 3 Puerto Rican women had been sterilized, many against their will.
So common is the method.
Puerto Rican women
Problem
I just wanna hear that again.
on the island.
By 1974, 1 in 3 Puerto Rican women had been sterilized, many against their will.
So common is the method that it is simply known as la operación.
What's wrong with sterilization and what has been wrong in the way it's been done in Puerto Rico is that very often women have not been informed.
42% of the women working in one factory outside San Juan were found to have been sterilized.
1 in 3. 1 in 3.
Puerto Rico had the highest sterilization rate in the world. Meanwhile, the island was poisoned for profit. Puerto Rico became riddled with over 500 Superfund sites. Superfunds are toxic sites filled with chemical waste. Companies like AbbVie, Merck, Pfizer and Upjohn dumped toxic chemicals like carbon tetrachloride, chloroform and acetonitril directly into the soil and water, while the US military used Puerto Rico as a testing site, leaving behind napalm, Agent Orange and depleted uranium. Residents of the island of Vieques have a 20% higher cancer rate than the mainland US. Children born near these Superfund sites suffer from higher rates of leukemia, seizures, learning disabilities and neurological damage. Puerto Rico's transformation stunned the world. Countries like Ireland and Singapore
I just want to pause and shout out to my guy Darren over here. Sticks. No more picks. Shout out to him for being here.
looked at Puerto Rico's rapid industrialization and took notes. They studied how the island attracted foreign investment. They saw how manufacturing and tax incentives could fuel an economy. But there was one huge difference. Ireland and Singapore have sovereignty. They can control their own economic policies. As a colony, Puerto Rico couldn't. For example, they couldn't repeal the Jones Act to make themselves more competitive or to make prices on the island lower. Puerto Rico can't make trade deals with other independent countries. They can't even higher or lower the minimum wage because that's set by the US Congress. Ireland and Singapore kept much of the wealth they produced. They reinvested it to create better jobs, to improve infrastructure, and to develop new industries. Puerto Rico couldn't turn this system into genuine economic development. This system simply used Puerto Ricans as permanent, low-wage labor for US corporations, improving their global competitiveness. Since Puerto Rican firms didn't get the same tax benefits, they also couldn't compete with US firms. The profit created by Puerto Rican workers drained out to the United States. US corporations extracted $334 billion in profits between just 2008 and 2017. Puerto Rico is one of only 3 places in the world that lose more than 30% of the income generated within their territories. The other 2 are Equatorial Guinea and Iraq.
Actually, I wanna hear that again as well.
One of only 3 places in the world that lose more than 30% of the income generated within their territories. The other 2 are Equatorial Guinea and Iraq. In 1996, Bill Clinton and Congress ordered the phase out of Puerto Rico's tax exemptions and set them to expire by 2006. Around the same time, the United States signed the NAFTA and CAFTA trade agreements.
That's also around the same time that the population in Puerto Rico began to decline, like substantially, like up until the late 2000s, like as we saw earlier in the video, the population was growing.
Puerto Rico's key advantages has always been that it has tariff-free access to the US market, but NAFTA and CAFTA extended tariff-free trade to other countries in the region with much lower wages, erasing Puerto Rico's competitive advantage. The impact was devastating. Thousands of factories closed and hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans were left jobless. The economy collapsed. Desperate to cut costs around 2009,
they've hiked sales taxes, corporate taxes, and income taxes. Utility rates are up dramatically. Some water bills have doubled. And to cut costs, government workers have been laid off, their retirement benefits cut sharply.
But these austerity measures weren't enough. The island simply didn't have the cash to continue to pay for basic services. Unlike an independent country, Puerto Rico, who uses the dollar, can't print more money. They can't restructure their economy, and they can't borrow money from international financial institutions like the IMF. Puerto Rico did, however, have bonds. Bonds are essentially an IOU sold to investors with a promise of repayment plus interest. Since 1917, Puerto Rican bonds have been unique. They are triple tax exempt, which means they have no federal, no state, and no local taxes, which makes them extremely attractive to investors. Even as Puerto Rico remained in a deep recession, Wall Street investors continued to buy more and more Puerto Rican bonds. They felt extremely secure in their investment because in 1984, the US Congress quietly passed a law that made it illegal for Puerto Rico to declare bankruptcy. Investors assumed that they would get paid no matter what. As the 2008 financial crisis hit, Puerto Rico's economy continued to nosedive, and the government issued more and more bonds just to cover basic expenses, and their debt was beginning to crush them. For example, in 2011, Puerto Rico sold $1.1 billion in bonds, of which $850 million was used to pay previous debts. In 2017, they raised their 7% sales tax to 11.5%, making it the highest sales tax in the United States, and every single cent of that tax went to paying debt.
At Raymore and Flanagan, everyone from our knowledgeable home furnishing and sleep.
I'm not gonna skip the ads because like I wanted him to get his, because this is a great video, but I don't know. I don't really have anything to add. I feel like he's doing a pretty good job at like being concise and specific. I think he skipped over a lot of the struggle for independence during the, I'll say, 20s to the 60s and 70s. He skipped over so much rich and meaty history, but he's getting at something like, oh, hold up. He's getting at something that is relevant like till today. So he's doing a good job at pacing this and not focusing too heavily on one aspect of the history or the other. Like he didn't really talk about like pre-US colonialization that much. He didn't talk about like the Spanish colonialization. Um he touches on the US colonialization early, skips over a heavy portion of like mid 20th century struggle for independence, and then now we're going into today where like the aftermath of all this stuff. So but he's doing a great job.
Percent of that tax went to paying debt. By 27,
Shout out to him. Hold on, let me find his thing. Cogito. Shout out to him.
Puerto Rico's debt had skyrocketed to $74 billion, or $123 billion, including pension obligations. Wall Street, knowing that Puerto Rico had limited options, was extremely predatory with the loans they offered. A huge chunk, about $37.8 billion of that $74 billion debt, came from capital appreciation bonds. These are essentially the payday loan version of bonds. The original principal on those loans was just $4.3 billion. The remaining $33.5 billion is pure interest.
And that's interest that the people of the island have to pay.
In 2014, Puerto Rican bonds were declared junk, and the island lost the ability to borrow any more money. In 2015, Puerto Rico tried to pass a law which would allow it to restructure its debt.
He's also like skipping over
that law down.
He's also skipping over a lot of like the corruption that happened with politicians that are there as well. But I don't think that that's relevant. I mean, it's relevant, but I don't think it's relevant to the full story that he's telling, the full picture that he's painting. Because you can go in depth on that issue in a whole different thing.
And so the economy continued to crash. On June 28, 2015, a debt repayment bill of $58 million was due. Puerto Rico couldn't pay it. The governor was forced to publicly declare the debts are not payable.
And he also, it was also illegal for Puerto Rico to declare bankruptcy at this time too.
And let me put this very clear. We're out of cash.
As Puerto Rico spiraled deeper into crisis, vulture funds swooped in. Vulture funds are firms that specialize in profiting off financial collapse. They buy a country's debt for pennies on the dollar from bondholders who have written it off as a loss. They then drag the indebted country into court, almost always in New York, to demand full repayment, squeezing massive returns from crippled economies. Vulture funds have infamously drained Greece, Argentina, the Congo, and other indebted countries of billions. The investor Paul Singer of Elliott Management, known as the Doomsday Investor, sued Argentina and won a 1,380% return on their original investment. In the war-torn Congo, in order to collect $10 million worth of debt that he bought,
Free the Congo.
Singer started seizing about $400 million worth of the poor nation's assets. In Peru, in the year 2000, as their president Alberto Fujimori fled charges of corruption and human rights abuses, Paul Singer offered him a private plane to escape on, but first he had to transfer $58 million from the nation's treasury to Singer, which he did. In 2015, Puerto Rico proposed a bill to the US Congress asking them to allow some of their public corporations, like the island's power authority, to declare bankruptcy. This would give the island some breathing room by allowing it to restructure about a third of its debt. Even some of Puerto Rico's creditors agreed with this, thinking that it would free up some cash to pay back the rest of the debt, but the vultures wanted every last cent. These funds were already making huge donations to the Hillary Clinton, the Chris Christie, and the Marco Rubio presidential campaigns, alongside lobbying other politicians. The calls came in and the bill died. After this, the vultures started buying up even more Puerto Rican debt. Forbes reported that in 2015, these vulture funds controlled nearly 50% of Puerto Rico's debt. In 2016, to ensure that creditors got paid, the US Congress passed PROMESA, which imposed on Puerto Rico a fiscal management and oversight board, an unelected, unaccountable board whose only mission was to get Puerto Rico back to repaying its debts and back into a position where it could borrow money. It's known locally as La Junta because the board has absolute power and can overrule any Puerto Rican law. La Junta's 7 members are handpicked by the US president with no input from Puerto Ricans.
I'm gonna do this for myself right now. We're gonna find out who's on this board. Hold up.
Despite being imposed by the US, imposed on Puerto Rico.
Sorry, don't mean to get us sidetracked, but these are the people that are currently on that board.
A fiscal management and oversight board, an unelected, unaccountable board whose only mission was to get Puerto Rico back to repaying its debts and back into a position where it could borrow money. It's known locally as La Junta because the board has absolute power and can overrule any Puerto Rican law. La Junta's 7 members are handpicked by the US president with no input from Puerto Ricans. Despite being imposed by the US Congress, it is Puerto Ricans who will foot the $1.5 billion bill for La Junta. La Junta's executive director earns $625,000 a year, which is about 30 times the median Puerto Rican household income. Many of the people assigned to La Junta have connections to the financial world, many of whom helped to create the debt crisis in the first place. Now their job was to extract every last cent from working Puerto Ricans for the next 40 years. To ensure that Wall Street and the vultures got paid, La Junta imposed a brutal austerity program on Puerto Rico that hiked tolls, water and electricity costs, lowered the minimum wage, cut labour protections and removed sick days, slashed education funding which led to mass school closure, gutted pensions and healthcare, cut infrastructure funding and restricted access to food assistance. Puerto Ricans already tried austerity in 2009 and 2010. It only made things worse, forcing more Puerto Ricans to leave to the US, shrinking the economy even further. The way out of economic decline tends to be growth and investment, not cuts. La Junta, however, insisted on driving down costs and prioritising faster debt repayments, especially to vulture funds, all while Puerto Rico rotted away.
You have to evacuate, otherwise you're gonna die.
Hurricane Maria, a Category 4 storm, winds of at least 155
Category
miles
5 with sustained winds of
Hurricane
260
Maria slamming
kilometers
into
per
the
hour.
island, and as you heard, one official saying the island is destroyed.
I am begging anyone that can hear us to save us from dying. If anybody out there is listening to us,
this morning, harrowing accounts of survival are emerging after Hurricane Maria's devastating blow to Puerto Rico.
Roads, now rivers, homes demolished. 4 million residents here are without power. 100% of the island. Officials warn it could be months before electricity is restored.
Vino el viento, se llevó todo el zinc, se llevó la casa con toda la pertenencia, todo lo que había dentro.
The hurricane, they say, was a problem. The greater tragedy is the lack of government action.
There's a lot of old people here in Puerto Rico that they need help. You know, it's no, we can't let them die. We can't let them die.
I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you've thrown our budget a little out of whack.
Oh boy, the final days of the Ford Summer Sales Event. Great time to buy.
So, I remember that, I don't want to make this about me because it's not, but I remember the day that the, hold up. I remember this day. I remember watching that on the TV. I was a freshman in college. My cousin, I hadn't heard from him. He was down there, um, and you know, it was just heartbreaking to witness this exact moment. He's throwing the paper towels, and people are just eating it up. Like people were recording him and shit. It just pissed me off. I remember that. I'm sure a lot of people remember it.
A little out of whack.
On the 20th of September 2017, Hurricane Maria slammed into Puerto Rico, burying entire towns. The island's infrastructure, crippled by years of austerity, collapsed. 500,000 homes were destroyed or damaged, and the entire power grid was destroyed. The federal government's response was slow and inept. President Trump refused to waive the Jones Act until the 28th of September, which delayed the response and increased costs.
So why hasn't the government issued a waiver for the so-called Jones Act, as it did to help Florida and Texas recover from hurricanes?
We have a lot of shippers and a lot of people people that work in the shipping industry that don't want the Jones Act lifted.
When it was finally waived, it was only for 10 days. 9 days after Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, FEMA had approved $141.8 million in aid. 9 days after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, FEMA had approved just $6.2 million. The United States was slow in deploying helicopters and hospital ships for weeks, while victims of the storm fought to survive one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. Abandoned communities in Puerto Rico had no power, food, water, gas, or medicine. People were forced to drink water from toxic Superfund sites. Ordinary Puerto Ricans came together in brigades to clear roads, deliver food and water.
Along the way, we come across a caravan of more than 100 volunteers, all church members, who are traveling across the island distributing food and water.
Meanwhile, FEMA, the US military, and the local government failed to reach isolated communities for weeks. It took a full year to restore electricity to the entire island. 2 weeks after the disaster, President Donald Trump visited Puerto Rico and infamously tossed paper towels at hurricane victims. As thousands of Puerto Ricans were fighting for survival, he said Puerto Ricans want everything done for them. After Hurricane Harvey, Trump told Texans,
To those Americans who have lost loved ones, all of America is grieving with you, and our hearts are joined with yours forever. We are here with you today. We are with you tomorrow, and we will be with you every single day after.
After Hurricane Maria, Trump tweeted at Puerto Ricans, his fellow Americans, we can't keep FEMA in Puerto Rico forever. FEMA usually stays in disaster areas for years. Trump said this just weeks after the disaster, while people were still searching for their missing loved ones. Hurricane Maria killed over 3,000 Puerto Ricans. The hurricane didn't kill most victims though. The deaths came from a systemic collapse that followed. Ambulances couldn't reach the injured, unsafe water made people sick, and communities went months without electricity to power medical equipment or safely store medicine like insulin. The vultures began to circle again. The firm Golden Tree bought millions in Puerto Rican debt for 15 cents on the dollar in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. They'll make about $160 million off that investment, which Puerto Ricans will pay for. After Hurricane Maria and a series of earthquakes in 2020, Puerto Ricans were just trying to survive. While they were distracted, La Junta moved to privatize all of Puerto Rico's public assets. Tolls, ferries, PREPA, which is the island's power authority, were all handed over to private corporations, with no vote, no oversight, but with massive price increases. In 2021, Luma Energy took over Puerto Rico's energy grid under a 15-year contract that required no investment from Luma, but required PREPA to pay Luma $125 million a year. Luma fired experienced workers, dismissed union contracts, and raised energy rates 7 times. Despite Puerto Ricans handing over hundreds of millions of dollars to Luma, outages are now longer and more frequent than they were under PREPA even after Hurricane Maria. Half of the island went dark on New Year's 2024, soon after a price increase. This is the price of electricity in the US over the last 10 years. This is Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans pay around double the US rate for electricity. This is Puerto Rico.
I just want to make a note. This was Hurricane Maria. This was the earthquakes back in 2020. I don't exactly know what this was, nor do I know what that is.
Puerto Ricans pay around double the US rate for electricity. This is a major obstacle to economic recovery. High electricity rates drive up business costs, they drain household incomes, and they make basic survival difficult.
Hace 8 meses que estamos sin luz, no tenemos agua, estamos prácticamente abandonados, porque nadie ha venido a agencias de gobierno, no ha venido nadie. Necesitamos el servicio eléctrico porque yo soy asmático, mi hijo es asmático. Ella es cardíaca, diabética, necesita la energía eléctrica para el medicamento, para la insulina.
Puerto Rico's energy grid is based on oil and gas, but the island has no oil or gas, forcing it to import fuel on expensive Jones Act ships. Solar and wind energy are abundant on the island. After Hurricane Maria, communities with solar power had electricity for months, while everyone else was in the dark.
We were extremely happy to learn the solar system in Casa Pueblo was intact. We were the only place in town with power, and we were able to be a source of energy for the community.
There is a massive movement on the island demanding to rebuild a grid based on renewables, which...
Sorry, I'm just going to follow these people.
Of movement on the island demanding to rebuild a grid based on renewables, which would create a more reliable and safer energy grid while reducing costs, creating jobs, and helping pay down the debt. As of 2025, only 7% of Puerto Rico's grid is renewable because importing oil and gas is far more profitable for American energy companies, so the grid is being rebuilt on the same expensive, unreliable fossil fuel system that has already failed. Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico's public education system, causing hundreds of millions in damage. After the storm, locals rushed to help clear away the debris and save books and equipment. Governor Ricardo Rosselló and La Junta rewarded them with massive layoffs and closures, shutting down over 670 schools. Only 800 schools remain open. Families were forced to move to closer schools, which were now overcrowded and underfunded. As Puerto Rico's public education system was dismantled, for-profit charter schools were forced on the island. Charter schools take on fewer disabled and poor students, they have lower graduation rates, and they force families into debt at much greater rates. Charter schools do, however, benefit people who own Puerto Rican debt. Apollo Education Group, a for-profit school corporation and target of many federal investigations, owns Puerto Rican debt. Puerto Rico's education system has been dismantled on an island where over 50% of children live in poverty, cutting Puerto Rico's future off at the knees, forcing many families that want a good education to leave the island. Unlike for-profit schools, the University of Puerto Rico has the best graduation rate on the island. With 64% of its students coming from low-income backgrounds, the UPR is vital in raising people into the middle class. Rather than rebuilding this crucial asset, La Junta slashed its budget by 50% and raised tuition by 300%. This despite the fact that research has shown that every $1 million invested in the university yielded a return of $1.6 million. Enrollment has plummeted, and fields critical to Puerto Rico's recovery, medicine, engineering, and law, were gutted. Its neurosurgery program lost accreditation due to a lack of funding. Puerto Rico used to have the best healthcare outcomes in Latin America. Its public healthcare was free to nearly everyone on the island. In 1993, the governor Pedro Rosselló privatized Puerto Rico's public healthcare system, much like how his son Ricardo Rosselló sold off Puerto Rico's education system. The results have been disastrous. Puerto Rico pays into Social Security and Medicare like any US state, but when it comes to healthcare funding, Puerto Rico receives a fraction of what US states receive. Insurance companies frequently refuse to reimburse already low-paid doctors. Puerto Rico pays to train specialists who then leave for better paying jobs in the States. In 2009, there were 14,500 doctors on the island. Today, there are 9,000 to serve 3.2 million people. Puerto Ricans suffer higher rates of asthma, diabetes, heart disease, HIV/AIDS, and preterm births than any US state. Between 2001 and 2025, Puerto Rico's population shrank by 15%. By 2050, it's projected it will decline by 40%. Hundreds of thousands of working age adults gone, driven out by economic collapse, austerity, and rising costs. They leave because they have no choice. Puerto Rico is aging. Waiting rooms of underfunded clinics overflow with anxious seniors, and the few young people who stay behind struggle to find financial stability. They have fewer children than almost anywhere else on Earth. This shrinks the tax base, stunting any possible economic growth. More people of Puerto Rican descent live on the mainland US than on the island. Puerto Rican workers earn much less than their counterparts do in the States, despite a high cost of living and fewer federal benefits. Even after Bill Clinton's repeal of Section 936, Puerto Rico still offers massive tax breaks to corporations. Manufacturers, mostly big pharma companies, extracted $100 billion in tax breaks from 2017 to 2023. But now the government is begging the ultra-wealthy to come live on the island. A law, Act 60, offers wealthy Americans tax exemptions from federal and local taxes, capital gains tax, and taxes on passive income. This offer is not available to locals.
Yes, but crypto millionaires are flocking to Puerto Rico. That's because if you spend at least half the year on the island, you're free of taxes on capital gains. What a deal.
The result is that the ultra-rich have swooped down to Puerto Rico to buy cheap land from Puerto Ricans devastated by Hurricane Maria and years of austerity.
So we had a big hurricane in 2017, and that was amazing for the island.
Brock Pierce, crypto visionary and Bitcoin billionaire, relocates to Puerto Rico in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria.
I only casually observed Brock Pierce's entry into Puerto Rico and the claims that he was going to make it into a crypto utopia. But I'm well aware that the reason to go to Puerto Rico is for the tax benefits.
I'm clearly not here for those economic incentives. The stuff that I'm interested in are the things like helping Puerto Rico. I'm living a life in service.
This has created hyper-segregated communities of ultra-wealthy tax dodgers and the eroding of the Puerto Rico millions of normal, working people once loved. The purpose of Act 60 was to create jobs, but the result has only been a handful of cleaning, hospitality, and other low-paid, unstable jobs. Puerto Rico's beaches, legally public and open to all, are now being privatized by wealthy crypto investors, hedge fund managers, and real estate tycoons.
Locals say Aguadilla Pier Corp, the developer behind the construction site, has been building illegally on 3 areas near the cave, saying they've cut down a protected forest and let sediment from their site pollute the water below.
Locals are being pushed out by expensive hotels, short-term rentals like Airbnb, and foreign investors hoarding properties.
And while those Americans seek out a tax shelter in Puerto Rico, they're driving up the price of rent by 600%.
The infrastructure that failed with deadly results during Hurricane Maria is still desperately underfunded. Infrastructure continues to deteriorate while exclusive hotels spring up and billionaires demand docking space for mega yachts. In San Juan, where Puerto Ricans earn $30,000 a year on average, the median home listing is over $900,000.
I'm moving to Puerto Rico. So I feel like people are wondering why Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah.
Like how random.
Yeah.
Taxes. It's one vertical.
Yeah.
It's one.
Figures like Logan and Jake Paul have moved to the island to dodge taxes while abusing the local environment. Billionaire vulture fund investor John Paulson, who made billions off the 2008 financial crash and the collapse of Greece, and who owns millions in Puerto Rico's debt, is using Puerto Rico's distress to buy land and resort properties on the cheap.
Why did Paulson decide to buy up all this land?
It was cheap. Prices were plunging, so he could get it for pennies on the dollar.
The Puerto Rican government has used brutal force to crush any resistance to this scheme. Puerto Rico is now the 5th most unequal place on Earth. For centuries, Puerto Rico's wealth has been extracted, its labour exploited, its people sacrificed. It has been a tax haven for the rich, a testing ground for experiments, and a dumping ground for toxic industries. When Puerto Ricans demand independence, they are met with American bullets. They live as second-class citizens with no political power, pushed out of the homeland they clearly love. Today, under La Junta, Puerto Ricans have fewer rights, while people work multiple jobs just to survive, paying high taxes for crumbling infrastructure, failing hospitals, and a vanishing education system. Rather than investing in Puerto Rico in finding ways to bring the displaced home, the government has brought in tax dodgers who price local...
Okay, I'm just thinking a lot over here. I mean, if this doesn't fucking radicalize you, I don't know, I don't know what to tell you.
...out of their own homes. This kind of parasitic exploitation will soon destroy its host. Puerto Rico is being emptied, erased, and auctioned off. Without change, we will watch something terrible happen in real time. A Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. But you probably haven't heard much about this because the media rarely covers stories like this with the depth they deserve, which makes it hard to keep up with everything happening in the world. That's why Nebula is such a crucial space for creators. It allows series like War Room by Real Life Lore to exist, a monthly briefing that covers the most significant geopolitical updates, from ceasefire deals to conflicts in Myanmar, Syria, and beyond. Nebula even has an entire carefully curated news section to keep you updated. These kinds of series would almost certainly be suppressed on other platforms, but Nebula makes them possible. Nebula has a ton of exclusive and wide-ranging content, like the logistics of X, which unpacks the complex systems that keep our world running, like how search and rescue teams operate. There's also Abolish Everything, a hilarious comedy debate show where champions roast pet peeves they want banned from society. Or dive into Red Atoms, an engrossing series by Real Time History that explores the Soviet nuclear program, its societal impact, and disasters like Chernobyl. Real Time History, one of my favorite history creators, releases all their videos early and ad-free on Nebula, just like myself and hundreds of other creators. Nebula is an independent, creator-owned streaming platform, a place where thoughtful, quality content thrives, free from the pressures of an ad-driven algorithm. Every subscription helps fund bigger and more ambitious projects that wouldn't be possible otherwise. It lets creators like me spend more time and effort producing the kinds of videos you love. Game shows like Jetlag, which take place over continents, or in-depth cultural analysis like Boomers are all made possible by Nebula subscribers.
It's our job to bring
Nebula
with us
costs just $36 a year. That's only $3 a month when you use my link, go.nebula.tv/cogito, or scan the QR code on screen. If you really want to invest in the long-term future of independent content, you can even grab a lifetime subscription for $300. If you're already using Nebula and you love it, we also offer guest passes so you can share your favorite content with friends and family. So if you believe in creators, if you want to support new, exciting productions,
we need to bring them the resources, we need to help them build like social services,
head over to go.nebula.tv/cogito.
Infrastructure.
I really hope you enjoyed this video.
Like water,
a link to my Patreon is down below if you want to help support the channel. All patrons get early
stuff
access
like this,
to all.
we need to bring the resources necessary to do it down there. We can't rely on the economy of the island to grow at all. Like, we have to do that ourselves. We have to bring those resources down there, and we have to find a way to do that ethically, and we have to maintain the life of the island. Like, and that's not only the families, the human families, the human people. I'm talking about the fauna, the flora. We have to maintain what the island is. We can't we can't forget anything, and we have to do our due diligence and our research into knowing the history, the political landscape as it exists now. We also need to find ways to protect it as it is now, to learn from the mistakes of the past, to study the people that we agree and don't agree with, and to be willing to have dialogue on how to make the island better. Not not better as in different, better as in safer, more consistent utilities, education system that works. You know, like the biggest export is experience and tourist experience, but I mean, you can even see in the graph of the population decline, one of the biggest exports of Puerto Rico is Puerto Ricans. You know what I mean? Like that's one of our biggest exports. So we need to make an effort to make us stronger as a unit and focus on one thing I will say about the island is that it's a microcosm of the mainland United States, and then it's also a microcosm of the world. So if we can fix what we have there, if we can build like resilient utility systems, if we can build resilient education systems, resilient, I don't know much about politics, but resilient political systems, and with all these things built around the protection of the island, and the people of the island, and the animals, and the plants, like if we can build those systems there, we can export them. We can export these systems. Like if we can figure out how to maintain on the island and in the Caribbean as a whole, those systems, those ideologies can be exported to other places that are not, hurricane hotspots, that don't face the level of one, exploitation by the wealthy, and two, constant ecologic disaster and natural disaster. Like if we can figure out how to address that on the island and in the Caribbean as a whole, then we could like really, that's something that can be shared with the whole world if we study it, if we write it down, and do a good job at documenting it and saying why it worked and what made it work slower, and stuff like that. Yeah, shout out to Cogito. I'm gonna subscribe to him. Yep. I guess I'm done for now. I'm gonna take a break. And we'll come back someday. Probably maybe later today. I don't know.